At She Can, we tell women's stories. We interview women from all over the world and tell their stories, how they got to where they are today, because it's easier to be what you can see. So we're building up a massive library of women role models to help women of every age, really. I'm really excited to talk to Laura Friedman Williams today. Laura, welcome to She Can. You're a writer and you wrote a very important book called Available, the unfiltered and empowering new memoir for women about sex, dating, and divorce after 40. Vogue describes it as gripping, empowering, says Cosmopolitan, joyful, says the FT. You've had incredible reviews. There is many women around the world who are reading your book and feel really empowered by you telling your story. It's an honest, empowering, and humorous and true story. So tell us more about that.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. And being told that I'm empowering other women is very empowering to me. So I appreciate that introduction. Um, I would say, my story is really that I was living a very happy and predictable life, in that it was predictable for me. It was the life I wanted. I wanted children. I wanted a husband. I wanted a really nice family life. I really embraced family life. I had worked in book publishing, so I had a background in books and English and the language. And I always enjoyed writing, but it was just something that I did, like in writing letters or emails, any kind of communication, not really creatively so much. And then in when I was 47, I found out that my husband was having an affair, and my world obviously crumbled.
Yeah.
But what was very surprising to me and continues to surprise me is that I didn't want to go back. Um, I think, according to my storyline that I'd been writing up until then in my life, um, I would have expected myself to figure out a way to make the marriage work.
Mm.
Um, you know, I was in it for the long haul, and it never occurred to me. There was never even a fleeting moment in which I thought my marriage might not make it. We'd been together since we were 20. We'd grown up together. We were like, he was my family.
Yeah.
Um, but I didn't want to go back. It was just shocking to me. Like, I don't want this back. He really put it in my court. He really wanted to try to work through it. And I couldn't. I just couldn't get there. And early on, we went to couples therapy, and the therapist said, "Do you guys think that while you're in this trial separation, you should date other people?" And I, without missing a beat, said, "Yes, definitely." I knew I needed to see what was out in the world. I just
Mm.
needed to understand. I was so sequestered. I realized, like, in my own little bubble of a world, and I had no idea, what does it mean to be with another man? What does it mean to be single? Like, I don't know. So I started a journey. It wasn't meant to be embarking on a journey at all. It was meant, I would say, like, what's the next step? Right. The next step is you have to have sex with another man. That was the next step for me. You have to see what it's like to be an adult woman in this situation. Maybe you're not cut out for it, and maybe you can't hack it. And then you've got to figure out, are you going to stay single, or are you going to go back to your husband? But it really opened something in me. It was like I was split wide open. I had no idea that I could enjoy sex so much. I had no idea that I could enjoy being a woman so much, outside of being a mother, outside of being a wife, and everything changed. So it did start this sort of journey for me, that lasted, I would say, it was like I don't know, 10 months about. And I just decided I'm going to embrace every opportunity to see what kind of a life I can have. So I dated a lot. I slept with a lot of men. I talked to a lot of women. I just opened myself up. I'm naturally a very curious person, and I just became even more curious. And I think when you make yourself vulnerable to somebody, you invite them to be vulnerable with you. So my conversations got very real very quickly. I was not interested in wasting time. And and then the book came about because I amassed this collection of stories along the way. Some were funny, some were heartbreaking. There was just this collection of stories that I would tell to my friends, who were shocked by the life that I was suddenly living, because I was supposed to be living the same lives they had. And that was sometimes really hard for me. Even now, 6 years later, sometimes that's really hard for me.
Mm.
Um, and so I decided to just put together this collection and see what would happen with it. And it became a book.
And it became a really good book. Laura, so tell us a little bit more about where do you think, I mean, you obviously went on a sort of self-discovery during the course of that year. And do you think that you sort of awakened yourself, or do you think, it just wasn't you beforehand and it was a sort of a trauma and it made you a different person? Or where do you think, how do you think how does it feel to you? Do you think that you were hurt and you couldn't go back, and therefore you wanted to find the different side of yourself? Or do you think you've been repressing it beforehand and you wanted to be so good? Right, as women we always taught to be good, and since we're little we have to be good. We have to be good, playing well, and we can't really be brave, and we shouldn't go out there, and we should play with our dolls, and we should learn how to cook, and we should bake, and all of those conditionings that we put on girls from when they were little. And then we have to have a boyfriend, and not too many boyfriends, because then we're slutty, and all of those conditionings that we hold as women and that society puts upon us. Do you feel that you were just living those conditionings, and all of a sudden there was this moment in time that gave you the opportunity to have a reset and actually think, okay, but what else is out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think about that all the time, like the question of like how we are informed by trauma, right? Like, does trauma end the life that we had, and then we have to find a new way of being?
Mm,
Does trauma end not just the life we had, but the who we were, and what we could count on in the world? And I do think those things are true. I also think as you're describing, I assigned a lot of shame and guilt to sex. I think that sex for me, like when I started having sex as a, I don't know, 17-year-old, it was like at late high school. It was definitely something you weren't supposed to do. It was illicit. My mom and I were not talking about it. My friends and I talked about it because we were like, it's so embarrassing to be virgins. We've got to get this over with. But we did it like to kind of fit in. It
yeah,
wasn't really about, like understanding who we were or getting our needs met, these sexual needs. And then my husband and I, we met when we were um, almost 20 in college, and we had a really robust and nice sex life. We were free, we were young, we had dorm rooms to ourselves. And so I do remember it being really nice. But then we got married, then we had 3 kids. The kids took over. I was exhausted. I felt he didn't help me enough. We fell into like the classic tropes of, stay-at-home mom who is so exhausted and overworked at home. My husband traveled a lot. He wasn't as engaged as he could have been. We were young. There myriad of issues.
yeah.
So I think I just took that, whatever I was. I sort of feel like I got stuck in the sexual identity that I had, you know, like before when I was in my 20s, and then I had children, and having children, it really changed my attitude about sex. Sex became something that was like, a function. It was something like you did to have a result. And then sex became I was so tired. I mostly just wanted to be left alone.
Mm,
So then sex became like a favor to my husband. It was like, "I'll do this for you because this is like the bare minimum." But there was very little about it that was, like, nice for me. I mean, I liked it once I was doing it, but I didn't think about it. Mostly, I would have rather just gone to sleep, untouched. But what was interesting was that here I am then, in my late 40s, and I'm having sex. I'm in a hotel room with a strange man. He doesn't know me. My family doesn't know I'm there. I don't know anybody. I can do whatever I want. I can be whoever I want. And it really freed me because I realized that I was really ascribing to all the shame and secrecy that I had been raised with, and that I didn't have to anymore. I could just do whatever I wanted. And that was so empowering. And then I learned to love it because it was freedom. So, did I love sex because it was freedom? Did I love freedom because it was sex? I don't know. I mean, I definitely used sex as therapy. I used it in a lot of ways, but it just kind of allowed me to be like, oh, I am who I am, period. I'm a middle-aged woman now, and I can be who I want to be without constraint. So reclaiming my sexual identity gave me so much power as a person, not just sexually, but just like as a woman in the world.
Yeah. Laura, I'm wondering, do you feel that that reset that gave you the power that you now stand in, how do you think this is possible staying within a couple? I.e., have you ever thought about the many women that don't have your journey and don't have that opportunity? Do you think it's possible to potentially figure out ways to reclaim yourself? And many women, right, many of us, we have 3 children or 2 or whatever, we have children, we're in these relationships and we're all trying so hard to make them work and to give, to witness each other and to respect each other and to love each other, and but we do get lost within that because we have so many roles as women, right? So we don't really have the time for exploration and sometimes we even forget what we wanted at one point because it's so
Yeah.
long ago we haven't cultivated it, and that really comes with, I think, motherhood, but also, some women who don't even have children, right? They have so many
Yeah.
different roles and they sort of forget about themselves, and that's
Yeah.
also a conditioning we hold. Do you think it's possible to reclaim that within keeping a family intact potentially?
I totally do. I think it's not as easy, because you are maybe more self-conscious. I think I would have been very self-conscious in front of my husband, which is funny because, he saw me give birth 3 times. He saw me be sick. He's like, he saw me in every moment. But I think that's why I would have been self-conscious because he knew me so well that like if suddenly I was going to try to be like a sexual vixen, it would feel like I was like acting, that it would feel silly. But I absolutely think it's possible, and I often think about that question. Could I have redefined myself within our marriage? Number 1, I think we could have communicated so much better. We could have had uncomfortable conversations about sex that
Mm,
said, like, "This is why I really don't like it." And I think a lot of the time I was saying that. I don't like it because as much as I like it, I'm tired. You don't really help me. You don't help me put the kids to bed. You don't help me clean up the house. I'm physically exhausted. So I always think, well, if he had really listened to me and
mm,
done those things and come home at a reasonable hour, then maybe by, at bedtime, I would have been like, okay, look, bring it on. Like, I'm ready. I never got that from him. Um, I wasn't open to trying new things, and I think I was just too shy about it. I think it probably really would have helped us to get a little bit out of our comfort zone. He was very open and always wanted to try things, and I probably should have just tried going out of my comfort zone. I mean, honestly, the funny thing is I was the person always in our group of friends that would say, "I don't know if, like, him having an affair would end our marriage. Like, I would be fine with a one night stand. I don't really care. Sex is sex to me. It's just it can be emotional and it can mean a lot of things, but it can also just be physical. And if he wanted to have a physical interaction with a stranger somewhere on a business trip, I didn't really think I'd care that much. I still don't really think I'd care that much. My problem was he had a relationship with someone, fell in love with her. That
mm,
was my problem,
mm,
not the sex. I really didn't care that much about the sex. Even if he'd never slept with her, he was in love with her. That was my problem.
yeah.
So I sort of think back, like, I think, I wish that we had just said to each other, "You have a hall pass. Go away for the weekend and do what you want to do, and then come back to me." And I do wish that we had just been more open. I do think that married couples, like, we have, along with the shame and the guilt about sex, we have such prescribed ideas that when you are in a marriage, you are in a sexual union that is with this one person. And I'm not suggesting that everybody be non monogamous or that people be polyamorous. I'm just saying sometimes, it's just have sex with a random stranger and then you go back home. You might learn something. You
Mm,
might feel more open. You might feel sexier. I feel like we could have done that. Honestly, I feel like we were both secure enough that we could have withstood that. I don't think it's the worst idea. I think couples therapy is a great idea. It forces you to talk about uncomfortable things with a moderator. I wish that we had made more time for each other. on dates with just each other where we didn't talk about work and we didn't talk about the kids. We remembered why we loved each other. So I absolutely think it's possible. I see that it's possible. I have friends that are in happy marriages and they have really healthy relationships, and other ones who don't, for sure. But I still think they could get there. But it takes two people that are willing, right?
Definitely.
You
Yeah,
can't do it on your own.
no. Laura, and so how is your relationship now, and how does he feel about this book?
You mean my ex-husband or the man I'm
Ah,
dating?
yeah,
My
he's your
ex-husband.
ex-husband and he's your co-parent, right?
Mhm. Yep. Yeah. So we definitely went through, a lot of really big bumps. I would say it's been 6 years since we separated, and now we're divorced. And we've really established separate households. I can't believe this. We are probably like better communicators than we've ever been. I think I am able to say now fully, I forgive him. I don't blame him completely. I wish he had done the exiting of the marriage in a different way.
Mm,
Um, but I understand that a lot of this had to do with him and not me, as hurt as I was. And I love him and I want him to be happy. He's my family. I still think of him as my family. And most importantly, he's the father of my three kids. So we have a lot of co-parenting. We still have a child at home who's 13. The other kids are in their 20s, so they're a little more independent.
mm,
But I see the degree to which being a co-parent with him closely is a benefit to the kids, and that's always my goal. And thankfully, that's his goal too. So we speak constantly. We meet for coffee like every couple of weeks to talk about the kids and what's happening. He gives me work advice. We really communicate well. I think there's a lot of grace that we've given each other. I think the book was hard for him. I think he felt very maligned in it. I tried to say to him, I felt that I was very gentle on him. My friends thought that I was very kind to him. Time has softened a lot of the wounds, for sure. So it wasn't that he was uncomfortable with my sexual journey or, my empowerment. I think he was fine with all of that. I just don't think he liked my exposing the cracks in our marriage.
mm,
I think it made him feel very emasculated.
yeah.
And I talked about not really being engaged in my, sex life with him, but then like, I was very engaged in my sex life with other people. So I think that was hard for him, and I felt for him, but I also couldn't make that a stopping point for myself because it was it just didn't feel fair. It was my story. I kept saying that to him, like, "I'm sorry that you're in my story, but it's my story."
Laura, and so give us some top tips to our listeners of how did you step into that power and that boldness and that bravery to really tell your story so vulnerably and so openly?
I mean, first of all, I think it's always about doing the next step. I mentioned this earlier, and I'm a big believer in baby steps. You just edge forward. Everybody wants to be here. Like, I know people get on apps, dating apps, and they feel very discouraged because it can be very discouraging. And they have a few failed dates or terrible experiences and they write them off. And to me, you can use everything as a learning opportunity. So a terrible date is a learning opportunity. It's not a terrible date. It could be a funny story. It could be a devastating story, but it's going to be a story in your next chapter, and you have to have those. So if you're sitting home by yourself, you're not going to have chapters to write. So I think that's one of my top tips is just get out there. And if it stinks, it's terrible, laugh about it. Tell a girlfriend, just move on,
Mm,
learn from it. I made some terrible mistakes. I mean, one situation I still like, I can't believe the position I put myself in. I would say it was not safe. It wasn't smart. It was everything I would tell my daughters not to do.
mm,
But I learned so much from it. I have no regrets. So that's one thing I would say. Baby steps and have an open mind. I mean, if you are curious, I feel often people just don't ask the right questions. If you really want to know someone and you really want to know their experience, ask meaningful questions, about what works for them and what doesn't work for them they want. And that's what I did. When I was with all these men, I didn't want a relationship. I didn't have time for a relationship. I wanted to understand people
Mm,
and what makes them tick and what makes them open. And I felt like by being open and by sharing myself very honestly and not in a bitter way, just in a sort of observational way,
yeah.
that people were very open with me about, what they wanted, what worked, what failed, what they wanted going forward. I mean, that's true in relationships and also with friendships. That's true with anybody. You can have a meaningful conversation at a cocktail party, or you can talk about something that you won't remember the next day.
Yeah.
So that's another tip I would have, is just to be open. And you know what? Be kind to yourself. Just give yourself the grace to move forward and to know it's going to be super awkward. There's no way around it. I think you're going to stumble. You're going to be embarrassed. You're not going to know everything you're supposed to know, and just forgive yourself. I felt often when I was going through my journey like a child. I felt like very childlike in a lot of ways. Like I had to learn so much about what it meant to be a woman who was dating, a woman who was working, all of these things, a single mom. And sometimes I felt like I'm definitely not doing this right. I'm not getting this right. But that can't be your stopping point. You can like feel bad for yourself for a day and then you just got to move on. You just have to be kind to yourself, kind to other people and kind to yourself. And I think those are my biggest tips, is just to stay open, not judge yourself, and have fun. Like that would be my last tip. Is just like have fun. Let yourself go. It can be so much fun. Going on dates with people, strangers, meeting people, having sex with new people is just fun. I still think that's fun.
Laura, so what do you think are the sort of biggest takeaways from the last 6 years by writing this book and now by living your life? What are your biggest takeaways?
Honestly, that reinvention is possible, that you can be in absolute free fall and land on your feet, but you
Mm,
gotta get dirty. You know, it's
yeah,
it's no
totally.
one's gonna do the work for you. I think one of the biggest shocks to me, I had such like a close family, and I was really close to my children, and I was really close to my friends. So I had a very large support network, which was
Mm,
wonderful. And I don't know what I would have done without them. But I became very aware early on that none of them could get me out of where I was, that I only had myself. It was really a revelation to me. I realized like my mother, my sister, my best friends, my ex-husband, my children, they could be as kind to me and as helpful as humanly possible, but at the end of the day, you have to live with your own decisions, and you have to make them on your own. Nobody was gonna make them for me. It was such a shock to me because I kind of always, and my ex-husband and I, like, we decided everything together. For almost 30 years, we'd been
mm,
making decisions together, and suddenly I had to do it on my own. And I remember, like, having conversations in my mind thinking, like, it's just me. It's just me. What's it gonna be? And so that was terrifying.
terrifying. I can imagine that.
Yeah. But I did it, I did it. And I think what I learned is that you don't really understand what's in front of you. You have to go through it. There's that great book, When Things Fall Apart.
Mm,
And I read it, and I remember her early on in the book, she says, she's like a lot of Buddhist teachings, but she says, when something happens, you don't really know what it means at the time. If it's the best thing, you got something you really wanted, and you think everything is going to be great now and resolved, it may not, it may turn out to be the worst thing. You get the worst news and you think, now my life is over, everything's going to fall apart, but it might turn out to be something amazing. And I have really taken that to heart. I take a lot more with at face value now to understand when bad things happen. Just wait a minute. Just give it a second. Let it
mm,
sort itself out and then work your way through it. So I think my biggest, I have a lot less anxiety than I used to have, which is like, it's funny because I was a much more anxious person in my marriage. And now I feel like the fact that things have worked out the way they have gives me so much confidence that if you persevere, you can make it work. I feel like I created a life out of nothing. And that's, again, I just said I have a great family and I have my kids, so I didn't have nothing. But inside, I was so broken. I
yeah.
was so devastated because my whole future was obliterated. You
Mm,
know, and my past. Like, I had to look back and say, "That marriage was not what I thought it was." That was devastating to me. But
Mm,
out of, like, I would say, the ashes inside of myself, I rebuilt myself. So you and it could anybody could do it. That's how I feel. I feel like if I could do it, anybody could do it, and I think I just had a lot of determination and resilience inside of myself that I didn't know I had.
yeah,
So I feel like most of us, we can do that, but you have to be really brave. Like, you gotta be willing to fall,
yeah.
and that's not easy.
We can
It's still
surprise
not easy.
ourselves. Mm,
Yeah, I mean, I find that in other aspects. You have a full-time job now. I'm in the corporate world. I didn't work for 25 years. And I'm still learning. I'm still worried. I went to a business conference and it took me like an entire week of shopping to figure out 2 outfits that I could wear because I felt so insecure about what a professional woman is supposed to look like. And then I ended up wearing old things out of my closet anyway because I felt more comfortable in them. But it was like, it's still that journey of, this is not comfortable for you. You're not used to this, but you're going to be. You just have to do it, and then you're gonna be fine. So I have a lot of faith in myself. I'd say that's another thing that I've learned in the last 6 years. I have a lot of confidence because I've shown myself I can do it. I've shown my kids that too, which is, even more valuable to me.
Laura, and so tell us a bit what happened in the last 6 years since you wrote the book.
Well, so the book came out a few years ago, like maybe 3 or so years. So, but the story of the book, and the journey. I got divorced. I got a full time job. My kids are all, in a pretty good place with their dad and with me. And I'm still dating. He's number 6 in the book. Um, I numbered them, by what where they
Ah,
fell in line.
yeah.
And when I met him, we were still, it was new. We were taking it slowly. And so I was still dating other people. And so he and I were still together. Um, and we don't live together. We spend time together when I'm not with my children. So we've limited time, and he's very open and gracious about like kind of giving me over to my kids. And sometimes I still, am interested in other people because I have this curiosity about myself. Like, I feel like I awakened myself sexually, 6 years ago. And I'm not willing to put that to bed to be like monogamous with one person again. I can only have one relationship at a time because, the days are short. There's only so many hours in a day. But I do not close myself off to experiences with other people. And number 6, as I call him, is very open. As long as I'm honest and open with him, which I am, I think we have an understanding that this part of myself that I found has to continue to be honored. Um, and I actually just feel very lucky that I met somebody who can handle that because I think a lot of people wouldn't be able to. Um, and so, honestly, my life is good. It's quiet. It's peaceful. I found peace again. I think I understood one of the things I really identified. I think all my life I felt like to be happy meant being sort of like an exalted state. Like I'm so
Mm,
happy, I'm excited. I sort of like conflated those things. And I would say happiness now I really define as being in a peaceful state of mind. So, my kids are good. My job is okay. My relationship is good. My relationship with my ex-husband is good. So I'd say I'm happy because I'm peaceful. And that is really a revelation for me after 6 years of what felt like an absolute roller coaster.
wow, Laura, I love listening to you because it feels like you've found all the pieces of yourself and you opened that door and you would never close it again. And somehow people came into your way that are fine with this way of life that you have decided for yourself and are so unbelievably comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not compromising anymore. I really am saying to people, this is who I am. And I'm not putting that away for anybody anymore, not even for my kids. You know, I really am I want my kids to be happy and comfortable. I want them to be open with me. I'm so close with all of them. I'm so blessed with these children. They're so funny and they tell me everything. And they don't always want to know so much about my personal life. I don't tell them. They just, they're my eldest daughter, she's 24 now. Her friends love reading my book and talking to me about it. And she's always like, ugh, I don't want to hear this. You know, but I didn't let her discomfort stop me
Yeah.
because I almost did. And
Mm.
I thought, I often think, what if I don't, if I do or don't do these things, what am I going to live to regret later? And really, the big thing is letting other people dictate what my life is going to look like. I just won't do that anymore. So, I don't want to be married again at this point. I don't want to live with anybody. I love living alone. I always am going to put my kids first. I probably am always going to want to sexually experiment, and I get to decide that. I'm paying my own bills.
Yeah. No,
I,
it's amazing. It's
yeah.
completely shackle free. Laura, so is there anything in your sight that you still want to experience or do? Is there any goals or dreams or plans for you in the next years? Or you think, as you said, everything is sort of perfect now, so why would I change anything?
Well, I'd like to believe that things will keep changing, that things will keep evolving and that my life will keep growing and opening. I don't want to feel like I got here, I landed, I'm on my feet, and the doors are closing again around this. Because I have felt that way once or twice in the past few years, and I have been like battering at the doors to get back out. Like, I don't want to feel boxed in by anybody, including myself.
Yeah.
I don't want to live such a safe life anymore. So I think I want things to keep evolving and changing. I would love to write another book. That's something I don't have time for. I work, as I said, I have this more corporate job and I work long hours. Um, and I like it. I like doing it, but it doesn't give me a lot of time to write. So I hope someday, I'll find more of a balance so that
Mm.
I can do that. That would really be one of my dreams, is to be more of a writer than, a corporate person. But I think other than that, I'm interested in seeing where this goes, where my relationship with number 6 goes, how I continue to feel, and I'm working on it still. I realize also there's like, you come into a relationship, we're both divorced after long marriages. You come in with a lot of triggers and habits, and we're always working on it. And I think for us, we're just always communicating, trying to communicate like, this is why I do this, but I want to do better. It's not like, this is why I do this. And so it just is how it is. It's always with a sense of, I think I could do better. Um, so I think my hope for myself is just that I continue to grow, and meet interesting people and always stay curious. Because I don't want to feel like this is it. I mean, I'm 53 now, so I'm solidly middle age. And I'd like to believe that I'm going to go into the next, chapters of my life with the same sass and boldness.
I think this is a beautiful note on that note to end, because you've shown us in this conversation how you stepped into your story, how you took these difficult decisions to be brave enough to run with what you were feeling, and you really stuck to your guns, and you continue doing that, and you made it work for yourself. So that's hugely inspiring. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Even when I hear you say that back to me, I'm like, yeah, I did that. It's like, it's still exciting to, I still can't believe it. I still can't believe I did it. So it's really always so nice for me to talk about it. And I hope, to be able to encourage other women to just give another life a try. There's lots of rebuilding. Most women who do it, by the way, are really happy afterwards. So if that's inspiration to anybody, but thank you for your time and your very good questions. I appreciate it.